Anthony Darby.
Shaw Ken.
We are live here with Tim Gunther at ilovecompliance.biz.
Yep.
And Tim is here via Miami, Florida, and we are so lucky to have him today. If you guys are unfamiliar, Tim handles compliance as a service. Can I say that? Is that fair? Yep. For a lot of Maryland cannabis companies and companies in now 30 states, I believe. For us, this was a huge step in the maturation process of our business, of being able to have a senior consultant like Tim come and assist us through navigating some really unorthodox waters, and when something is, which seems as simple as the MMC wants to pull vape pens, and then we have to say, well, but they forgot to mark 50% of their vape pens, and do we do what we're supposed to do, or how do we, and what's everyone else doing? And not only does Tim do a great job of having a good relationship with MMCC, but by having the book of business that you have, there's a good consensus that we feel with other industry leaders, so that when we make a decision, good, bad, or other, hey, they did it too with us, and they're good actors and we're good actors, so let's get some lives here. So Tim, with no further ado, please give us a brief introduction.
Sure, great. Well, first, thanks for having me out, and thanks for being clients. I think we're almost hitting a year mark with you guys coming up.
Yeah.
Yes.
We started implementation around in the first quarter of
last year, or this year. But so I love compliance.biz. My wife and I started it close to 4 years ago.
Do you really love compliance?
We do.
And Tim does love compliance. That's like,
I will tell you, everybody asks me that, and I would tell you that what we love about it. So you have to understand our background. So my wife and I are both former law enforcement from way back when in the military. My wife's track was PI work, and then federal agency, and then she has 25 plus years of law enforcement experience. Myself, I did the law enforcement, private sector security, got out and did IT operations, got into compliance. Always been in compliance, but got into compliance about 9 years ago with a company called Power DMS, and I was their executive, and their platform's been around for close to 19 years. And they are primarily in the law enforcement market. And so when I joined them, I took them into healthcare, oil and gas, aviation, anything that was high risk, high litigation. So about 4 years ago, my wife and I saw a conference in Denver, first symposium Denver was putting on. And I said, it's a marijuana symposium. I said, let's go. I told Power DMS, I think it's a new market. Went and was blown away by seeing you have this huge market going on, and you have all this regulatory, just people don't know what to do, but no one really giving guidance. So when I went back to the company, I said, I found our next market. Told them, they're like, nope, not going to do it. Marijuana, we're not going to touch it. I'm like, you guys don't understand the value that's going to happen. So went home, my wife and I talked about it, and I just said, you know what, I'm going to quit what I was doing. I was making really good money, and I was an executive with the company.
So you took a pay cut. This is the part of the podcast for everyone who listens. So you have to admit that you took a pay cut.
Important. I will tell you, I took almost a 60% pay cut from what I was making. What's important to know is I took a skill set and said, we're going to do this. So I went back to Power DMS, and they blessed it, and they said, we wouldn't do it with anybody else, and that was 4 years ago. That grew from their platform, and then we offered what's called a managed compliance services. So people who don't have a team or have a team that want to be supplemented by us, we do it from very small scale to very large scale. So that grew from 4 years ago to 2 or 3 clients to now we're 500 plus around the country in 30 states.
What was your first state, Colorado?
No, I avoided all the West Coast. I didn't. The issue with Colorado is that everybody knew what they knew and didn't need any help.
Everyone's an expert.
So
they've been up 3 years. Everyone's an expert.
So Maryland was actually probably my first anchor state in the sense that I'll just call him out. Trilogy Wellness, Herman Dunst, if you know him, great. He's the president of Trilogy. Went to Google, said I need document management. Found Power DMS. They called. Power DMS said, oh, Tim handles cannabis. And that was almost 2 years ago, and got with Herman and showed them what we did, and we came in and just blew their socks off. I mean, from a technology perspective. So we've been around now 4 years. We're in the hemp side.
So
of the
Maryland
business
was your first state?
Florida was my first. Maryland was the second.
Got it.
And then what we realized was all these states that were coming online 4 years ago, there were only 21 at the time. I started looking at all the Northeast states and said, you know what? Let's focus in the Northeast because it's new. People are trying to figure out what's going on, and the regulators are trying to figure out what's going on. So we grew our business pretty significantly in the Northeast. And so now in Maryland, we support 14 different clients, ranging from dispensing to cultivation and processing.
That's awesome. So, kind of a sidebar question. So, a place like California, who's, in my opinion, kind of like a clusterfuck in terms of their market, is that a market that you guys will just stay out of because it would be so tough to try to really add the value that you could add as opposed to a place like Maryland, who, although we have our challenges, like it's fairly straightforward and regulated in a much more precise way than like a place like California.
So interesting, we've got 4 clients in California, all picked up through Northeast clients who are starting operations in California. I grew up in Los Angeles, that's where I'm from natively. California is a cluster right now. It's one of those states that everybody thinks they know what they're doing already, so they're like, I don't need compliance, I don't need this stuff. We're not staying out of it on purpose, but what happens like in this state, we're getting referrals. Once the regulators go in and see the system, once they see what we've done, they're like, what's the system? And then other dispensaries start hearing about it. We picked up our first dispensary in California, up in Northern Cal. They're getting ready to get opened. And when the state comes in and inspect, I'm sure it's going to be the same response we always get. It's like, wow, you guys are set from because what people have to understand in the compliance world, it's not about, you need to have a good operations, but you need to have a good foundation of just good policies and procedures. You guys had those things. And you guys had structured that from what you just knew at the beginning. We just sharpened them up a little bit, right? And allowed you to do that. So California is an interesting market. We'll grow there, but it'll be much slower than what we'll do in the Northeast.
And touch on so many different topics because compliance really does encompass a ton of things. And I was the one kind of responsible for doing our compliance before I was lucky enough to find Tim kind of saved my life because I was drowning in it, right? But it's creation of standard operating procedures, which in this case could be, for a simple dispensary, people think of as, it's just a retail shop. Could there possibly be in there? I mean, there's a 50-page SOP that we follow, and we have a tiny little space.
Yeah, I wrote the original SOPs, and I'm not an SOP author.
Yeah. But you did it. But you did it because you read the regs, yes. You understood what needed to happen, and you had the sense to say, you know what? I may not have written these before, but at least if I understand the reg, I can write something.
And someone found it valuable enough to even purchase it from us. Like we were even able to sell that intellectual property because what I had done was more than what a lot of people got to. But for us, it wasn't so much that. First of all, we didn't do a good a job as we do now. Yeah. That's for sure, right? So you've taken us from a 7 to a 10, but it was so time consuming. And in a business like ours, I hate any type of liquor store or cannabis industry reference, but it's the same thing, is that if you're the biggest bar in town and they take your liquor license, I don't care who you are, you're out of business. Same thing with us. We have an amazing patient base. Our patients love us. We have an amazing medical model. We do good things in the community. But if we have a violation and we lose our license, we're shit out of water. We're done. So for us, for me, I remember the values. Like Chuck was like, it'll do this and it'll do that and it'll save me this and it'll save me that. And I was just like, for that number to be able to point the finger to somebody else and say, I get to focus on serving patients and growing this business and knowing that these guys keep me compliant in an ever-changing regulatory environment. Like Chuck said, I mean, people don't realize that we're regulated down to where the product sits at night and what time
of day you can bring it out.
Open our door and
Well, and I tell you what surprises me is how many licensees in this state, because we've talked to a lot, have never even really read the regulations. Yeah. I mean, if you sat through and read
if we had the money to pay an attorney to write our application, there's no damn way that I would have read the application or read the questions either. But we didn't have that luxury. So
but I think that's good.
We wear it as a
like to Darby's point. We wear it as a badge. It's a badge of honor, and I think that we find the value in it, and the value that a platform like this provides not only our dispensary but any of them is invaluable. I mean, patients don't see kind of the behind the scenes logistics that goes to kind of make all this happen, right? And it's still ambiguous and it's still new, and there are changes that are made on a weekly basis. I log into my platform and I see Tim's push down 17 notifications about consent orders and changes to the regulations and advertising regulations, and if you don't
every single employee gets that. Every single employee has to check it off.
What's important about that is you guys have a compliance culture already built because of what you guys did. it's not just about hiring us and saying we're done, we're good. We've actually fired clients because we're just like, that's not ethical. What do you mean? You are a compliance guy. I'm like, sorry.
I'm not here just to keep you guys out of trouble. I'm here to keep
make
you
sure
compliant.
you guys have a reputation and compliant. If you're not willing to do some of the things we recommend, I don't care how much you pay me. It's not worth it. And where you guys set apart from a lot of other dispensaries when I first met you guys, you already had that foundation, and your employees, you have a good energy at the store. Yeah. It's not about just processing sales. It's about the patient, as you alluded to earlier.
It's funny. We go to we dispensary shop, especially every time I have a Spark meeting on the Western Shore or something, and we went to a dispensary with Mary Pat, and they put both our products in one bag. I was like, well, who touches this? Because I want to know who is violating Comar.
What receives on which side of the bag.
Exactly, right?
Is there a divider slipped in between?
Corpon went to go pick up an online order, and they met him in the front. And he goes, well, what do you... He goes, you want to give me this here, in this zone? That's okay.
But see, this is where you'll see, and we were talking earlier before we started, was... First year, we're in our second year this week coming up for Maryland. First year is always that exploratory year of what's it about, because everybody's learning. You guys are learning.
Yes.
The state's learning. Second year is when it starts picking up, and this year you're going to start seeing them walking in doing unannounced inspections, and they do it all the time. But it's going to be for little things, and it's going to affect your business. So for me, we'll knock here. None of our current clients in all the 30 states we support have not been fined. Now, have they messed up? Yes. But if we own up to the mess up, show how we retrain and document it.
Yeah, I mean, I know a story of an egregious error that a dispensary owner shared with me, and you self-reported and documented, and it wasn't a big deal. It was nowhere near a big deal as if somehow someone said, pull the last 21 days of camera footage and show me XYZ. And then they would have a much different circumstance. So,
No, and I think a lot of, and we all know that we're all still learning the industry. So like you said, we're going to make mistakes, but being able to recognize the mistakes, once they're made or after they're made by an internal audit or some means of that, and having a proactive approach to the regulator saying, hey, we messed up, here's what happened, this is what we're going to do to fix it, goes a long way.
It's and I think we are getting to a point where things are much more definitive. There was so much ambiguity where we would ask the inspectors the same question and get multiple answers. So one of the things that I started tasking my team with, I said, every time the inspectors come, you need to have at least 3 questions for them. Because there's no way that we don't have at least 3 questions based upon the nature of our business. It's simple. Can I go pick up? Yeah. Right? That seemed to be.
And what I would tell you is that the key learning for anybody listening, that I don't care where you're located, when an inspector does show up, document the time they showed up, document what they looked at, document anything that they took. They ask you for copies of your waste log or whatever else, because a lot of what happens is they take all that and no one documents it. And in Maryland, it's no fault of the regulatory body. It just took them 11 months or 10 months to get you an inspection notice back saying, this happened 11 months ago. What are you going to do? And then most people are like, well, I don't remember what I did 11 minutes ago. Yeah. And if you document that.
So I think that's where we're going to see a lot of change. I mean, the MCC's committed to, I think, 30 days. Yeah. They're pretty adamant.
They've picked, I tell you, I commend them for what they've done and with their transition of staff, because people go in and out. But I know now we're having unannounced inspections, and I'm getting stuff back within 10 days, like it should, and it says, here are the things we found, how are you going to remediate?
Yep.
And most people are like, oh my gosh, we're going to get in trouble. But if you actually learn from it and learn how I can remediate against it and document it, and be honest what you're going to do, because when they're going to come back on a month later and say, let me see that thing you told me you were going to update.
Yeah. And I think part of that is in other regulatory industries, this all no-brainer, right? This is like the deputy jobber knows that this is par for the course. But in the cannabis industry, I don't know if it's because there's not a natural conformity and there's not a lot of standards like good manufacturing processes and these other types of standards that are standard. But you're right. It's the wild, wild west. It's chaotic. I'm surprised. when I see advertisements where Adam's handing Eve a joint, or Street Price Tuesday, or just all these other like crazy things, and then we see an advertising bill come, it's like, oh, well, what'd you guys expect? And then like you look at the advertising bill and it's not overly intrusive, but the MMCC said when they did an audit, 65% of the websites failed. And
when they go talk to the state representative who sees that ad, they're like, what's this thing on Facebook where they're doing these free things, and isn't this medical, right? And whether it's good or bad, you have to understand the reality is that this is new, and the state legislators who passed it are always reviewing things, and their constituents are calling them.
Yeah. So
you're having a marijuana bus drive around and drop off people.
And that's what we always like to tell people. Like, it's our job to portray it in a professional and like responsible way. And I think that gets lost a lot of times in
like
the industry.
One of the biggest political events of the year is the Crisfield Crab and Clam Bake, right? And it's right here on the Eastern Shore. It's about, let's say, 45 minutes south of us. That's how the advertising bill came, was because dispensary had a billboard of Adam passing a joint to Eve, and it's on Route 50 where every single one of those politicians passed. And by the time they were back to Annapolis, they were drafting legislation. So, like, to your point, like it's not. These legislatures didn't just give you the keys to the car and say drive it recklessly and do whatever the hell you want. They were convinced and kind of in some ways coaxed into putting this program in place, and it's so important that we are good stewards of it. And like,
and there's going to be bad apples. We all know that. Yes. I don't care what profession you're in, police, fire, healthcare, good and bad apples. What you have to do is differentiate yourself and just respond when you mess up. It happens. I don't care how good of a business, but also just make sure your employees understand. Because I think where we see it a lot of times is when we talk to any of our clients, I'm like, let's go down to the employee level. They need to understand the fines that happen. Like if it messes up twice or three times, that's a $5. In Maryland, you've got 3 fines: $5,000, 2 $5,000 fines, or a $10,000 fine. $10,000 fine can be if you're doing something that's not following safe practices and you're giving out bad medicine. Good manufacturing, GMP. Although it's not written, you do that. People should know that, but they don't. But if you educate and you don't have those allergens or something else getting into your mix because you're not doing something, washing your hands, wearing gloves. I mean, we do self-audit. So one of the other services we offer when clients that want us to have access to their camera system, they give us access and we do remote auditing. I know when processing day is. Our team logs in and watch. And if they see no gloves being used, it's a call to the dispensary. We record it, snap it. Hey, have so-and-so get their gloves on. We'll take that video, we'll put it into a training module, we'll put a test again, we'll push it out to every one of those employees at that dispensary. I'm not calling out that person, I'm just saying this is a $5,000 issue. Are you willing to take that risk?
Yeah.
And when they see themselves on it, they're going, oh, I don't want to be called out again. And it's more of a...
It's that culture of compliance, right?
We don't call it corrective actions, we call them teachable moments. That's what it is. It's a teachable moment because you're a business owner and I want your employees to know, like, this is a business. And I'm not trying to be on you for compliance. I'm trying to teach you how to be more compliant so that when we do have an issue, we can mitigate the risk very small instead of this broad range risk.
When you look at, if I can go back up to a 10,000 square foot view again. So when you look at your clients in the 30 states, how would you rank Maryland in terms of getting it right for the program versus some of the other states? And then tell us, kind of, in your opinion, why some of the states are failing versus why they're doing well. And Chuck and I, we have a couple of characteristics that we could probably spout off in our head right now, what we think makes successful programs: limits, flour, qualifying conditions, probably the 3
biggest ones.
Yeah, I think Maryland is doing a very good job. I would say they're at least in the top 5 or 6 out of the 33 states that are going. And I would tell you because the way their program was written, and it's non-ambiguous. It is ambiguous, but when you read through the process of what they're trying to get accomplished, I will tell you the other thing is they listen. One tough part is in a first year of a program is the regulators need to listen to what's going on and see stuff that says, well, the reg says this, but it doesn't make sense from a business sense to do this, so we need to change that. And they do it through bulletins and all that. So I would tell you that the things they've done to improve is setting up to where now you can go to their main site, put in your email address, and get alerts, the Nixle alerts about what's going on. Because we all know, like, when did this thing come up? Yep. When did that thing come up? And then we try to stay on top of that. I will tell you, from a standpoint where I see the program's headed through talking to leadership, it is in the right direction, and they're really trying to be make a good program and not be so what I'm going to call compliance driven, where they're just trying to fine you. Other states, so you look at Oklahoma, which was an interesting state. From a licensing perspective, they now have, I think, 2,500 dispensaries open. They had 6,000 They had unlimited licenses, unlimited. So is that program right or wrong? Yeah. So from a pure capitalist perspective, I'd say,
great.
Yeah,
right.
that's
competition,
great.
right?
Competition is good. But then what's going to happen is, what are the things you're setting up for someone to get a license? And it's easy as fill out this app. Here you go. You have the property. Right now you have 2,500 dispensaries in Oklahoma. Medical.
What's the population of the state of Oklahoma? Is it less than Maryland?
I'd have to Google it.
I feel like it's even less than Maryland.
I'd have to Google it, but what I would tell you is that program right or wrong? I'm going to say it's different, and I'm going to say that only the strong will survive. Because I think the one thing that everybody forgets in this business, and you guys, we talked earlier, like you guys are veterans of Maryland business, right? But people think, I'm going to get in the cannabis business and get rich. Right, everybody.
Everybody.
You're in the cannabis business. Cool. Let me. I'm gonna.
Where's your Lamborghini, bro?
Yeah.
Right. Where's your Insta account? And all that stuff. Right. They don't understand to start and how you guys started was like you read it, you did the best you could, and you got a successful business because you did business practices. You knew how to talk to customers. You knew how to interact. It wasn't about smoking the joint. It was about how do I help you get better at what
quality life, health outcomes.
And so, like somewhere in Oklahoma, that program's kind of interesting. California is very interesting.
So, just for those keeping track at home, Oklahoma has roughly 3,900 people, and Maryland's just over 6 million.
3.9 million.
3.9 million. Yeah.
Yeah, 2,500 dispensaries. How many growers and processors do they have for a program like that?
I have to look at the licensing, but again, it was like one of those unlimited things.
That's crazy.
And you get the problem is that it provides a market it's a medical market. It's not a recreational market. So then you got a question. Look at the states that surround Oklahoma, right? So we talked about earlier about when you get a license in a state that no one else is doing it around you. You may get patients coming in from out of state that become residents or whatever, but you got to look at those markets. California market is interesting because it was legal for 22 years. All you had to do is literally get a $5,000 business license, have a piece of property, and you could sell. 2 years ago, regs come out, 469 pages, January 1st of 2018, and it was or 17, it was like, here's the regs you got to follow now. And I literally still have people who I've talked to, it's like, oh, we're not going to follow those. I was like, what do you mean? You don't have a felony offense. You don't have these things. This was back when it first became legal, and I was at a trade show event, distributor event, and there were people like, oh, we're not going to apply for a license. It's like, why? You have a brand. You've been selling for 15 years. We just don't want to go through all that trouble. I'm like, you understand, your brand will no longer exist? Yeah. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, it's common sense. Just apply for the license.
So will they automatically give those people licenses who have been in business?
No, they won't. I will tell you, they have a program where you have to follow. There are a lot of rules in California. You have to have the licensing for the real estate. Just like in every other state, this is the other thing people forget. California has 588 counties, right? Only 84 counties are allowing to license businesses in them today. Okay, think about that for a second. So what happens, same thing in Colorado. Colorado had 330 counties. Only 33 went live back in 2012. The reason is because in a state, yes, it becomes legal, but every county has the right to say yes or no. And what happens is, it's going to happen in California. In Colorado, business started happening. We talked about it earlier. Tax revenue started coming in. So these outside politicians, what do politicians love? Money and re-election, right? They're like, we need to make that. So all of a sudden they decide we're going to put it on the ballot and pass it. And then they hand it over to two poor people and the government said, okay, you're going to regulate marijuana now. That's when we joined in 4 years ago. We went to that. We literally sat to two people that said, we're so worried. I was like, why? Well, are they going to go with it? And they just told us we're going to handle compliance. And they have no clue how to handle compliance.
Right.
That's why we got into it.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, now the M. Parade bill comes through. we're going to have this now. And like our executive directors, one was from law enforcement, who's known about cannabis as a medicine. The next one was a hospital. Clearly her hospital wasn't distributing cannabis medicine. So like, you know, it's very interesting to see. To your point, like I think Maryland does a decent job. Like it seems like, especially now, Will, you know, when he served as in the lobbying role, he was really good about talking at the MDMA meetings and working with Ashley, our lobbyist, and interfacing. And they kind of went through the process of how hard it was for them to get the advertising bill that we got, you know, without it being muddied up and with so much more red tape. And I feel good about the leadership direction. You know, if there's a new executive director and listen to this, I'm sorry, but I would like to see Will get into that role. Because
and he's been great. Will's been great, and I've talked to Will on several occasions. And again, it's about listening and really seeing what's going on and understanding what makes sense and what
he seems collaborative, not authoritarian, right?
That's the key.
And it seems that that's so important in this industry as we are still learning. And you talked about it, like, you know, we go to these policy meetings and we go through. And I went and testified. There was a policy meeting almost maybe a year ago now, and they let the inspectors come up with their suggestions, right? Mm-hmm. And it was everything from like not allowing free samples, which would do everything from impact one of the few benefits that I'm able to give to my employees, to more importantly impacting our Canna Care Fund, which is a program that we have for socially economically impacted people that can't afford medicine. And it was never even on their radar as the inspectors that that's how this was being used. For them, it was just, well, you wouldn't walk into the pharmacy and get a bunch of free oxys. Yeah. No, sir, you wouldn't. But there are people giving free oxys to all these doctors in sample form every day, sir. But we spoke, and the commission kind of looked around and said, okay, table and everything. And, you know, it was very clear in that moment that industry had, Jake and I were able to, Jake from
have an impact. Have an impact.
Yeah, have an impact. Where sometimes you don't always feel like that.
And I would tell people is know your regulatory body. And what I mean by that is I'm a business guy, and I've been in operations for a long time. Anytime I was out looking at someone new, a new company, I look them on LinkedIn. What's their background? If you understand the regulator's background, whether it's state police, whether it's health department, you kind of know where their mindset's going, right? Then it's just have a conversation with them, because again, it's an education piece. And states that we've seen that have been operating 3 or 4 years, where we've been in this business, it's that relationship building. And yes, you're not going to get through to all of them. It's just, but recognize that.
We've been blessed, honestly. We've had amazing inspectors. We've been lucky that we've always had at least some presence from the MMCC on the Eastern Shore. You know, sometimes in Maryland, the Eastern Shore is not very well represented in terms of these types of things. So you could have like a, you know, representative body of some sort, and they don't have a single person this side of the Bay Bridge, right. And it makes it tough. The MMCC hasn't been like that. We've been very lucky. We've had good representation, and everything has been good. Are there any, so let's talk maybe kind of moving in the future. So where do you see, you said that you've had some conversations, high-level conversations with the leadership team of Maryland. Like, what are some of the things that you see? Have you heard anything about these new applications coming out that you can disclose?
Well, if you didn't see, there was just the RFI for, if you haven't seen that yet, for the someone to investigate the process.
Yep.
So let me just step back and say, I think every state tries to do it what they think is going to be the right way. And then either technologies or systems or entities inside the system kind of mess up that flow. So it's an interesting thing that's going to happen.
That's a really great point, right? Like the intentions were there, but and I talked about this earlier, when you have such a coveted license, there's only 4 more grow licenses, only 10 more processing licenses, you're locked into a time period. It's going to bring out manipulation, it's going to bring out everything, because people want these licenses, right?
All you got to look at is, I live in Florida, right? So you mentioned that earlier. So Florida,
a lot of good news stories out of Florida too. I'm not gonna lie.
But I'm gonna tell you,
Broward County's killing it.
In Florida, they originally had 5 licenses that were up for grabs. $60,000 to apply for a license. They had 165 people just apply. but you had to be agriculture for 30 years, had all this stuff. When those 5 got announced, lawsuits happened. No matter what, lawsuits are going to happen. 2 more got approved because they found out 3 of the 5 were tied to some legislative people. But licensing in Florida, if you were lucky enough to get one of the first 7, and let's just say you spent $5 million because you were vertically integrated, which means you do everything.
Yep.
First one sold for $26 million 2 years into the program. 26. Next one sold for $103 million. Most of that, portion of that in cash, more in stock. MedMen bought one for $55 million. Now you're talking about a program that has been going. Now the patient count in Florida is crazy. I mean, I think it's now to. It was at 385,000 registered patients. Wow. So in the first 6 months of that program, they at 150,000. They were supposed to open up 10 more licenses, and they surpassed the 150 within 7 months of that. And again, so in Maryland, that whole thing that's going on, it's going to be interesting to see what happens because technology went down the day apps would be able to turn in. I was part of it. I was with 2 companies that we worked with that literally didn't work, right? So there's problem number 1. Then the problem is we're going to open it back up for this number of days. Okay, problem number 2 is you're not allowing those people who originally put in for it. Yeah, if you were in the system and you didn't get in because it closed out, yeah, I think you should let them in. But now you just open it up for another 2 weeks. Another red flag is going to go up because those are, to me, it's lawsuit. Yeah. I just started thinking like lawsuits. Yeah,
risk and liabilities, right? Like you said, this is what the contractual obligation that you have says you have to do. Well, every time you move the needle away from it.
Yep.
But again, I think there's best intentions, but as you said, these are coveted licenses.
Should a company have a clinical director? May or shall, right? We talk about this all the time.
That's right? Very important. May or shall, in regulations, know the difference.
It's like the first day of like pre-law. Like you learn that in political science. I mean, it's the difference between shall and may in legal terms.
So when you ask me, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm following it kind of closely because again,
you have some dogs in the fight.
We do, and then through some clients who needed some support, so we helped them. But we're just waiting to see kind of what's going to happen.
It'll be really interesting to see, and I'm also curious to see if we don't see through legislation some more licenses being added anyway. Once again, not through poor intentions, but I think if enough constituents are hammering the flower shortage and the things like that, then people are going to say, well, that sounds like a great idea to add some more. So I think, from our standpoint,
And people have to remember when we say add more licenses, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden they're approved and they're up and running in a month. Like these
18 months.
It's 18 months from the time that they're approved and it gets through the regulatory hurdles to the inspections and the local jurisdictions. And then when you start your
grow, and if you get the right crop going the first time, and
we saw yes, all the above. That even these process the last batch of applicants, there's no way that they're to market within the next 18 months, probably 2 years.
And the shame is that the flower shortage that's happened in the state and it's affecting patients. And then, good for those that got all 3 licenses because they get to stock their stores first. But then some practices of where you're telling people you got to buy. Who if I want to buy flour, you're telling me I have to buy these 2 other things.
We get a lot of that.
And so I've gone to the commission and said this is unfair business practices because I'm saying you want the flour, which is what you really want. I need you to buy this stuff too. And it may be not that it's subpar. It may not be what I want and what my people need because I got to sell it. And so those kind of things that are happening, collectively, you report business practices just because you say, is this right? And show the proof of it and wait till they come back. Because it's an interesting, and Maryland's going through all the same things that every other state's always gone through.
And because it's an interstate program and it's not outside of that, it's not like, oh, well, great news is there's a ton of extra flour in California or Colorado, so we'll just import some in.
Look at Oregon and the amount of stuff that's in Oregon that basically is so much surplus, but they can't do anything. Now those collective states in the Northeast are trying to. The governors got together to try to get it approved and trying to go to the federal government saying we'd like collectively to be able to do So that came up probably.
Do you think that something like that has any legs right now?
I think it does. I think it has legs in the sense that you get governors who are pushing an agenda where it's a multi. I mean, California will do $4 billion in sales by itself, in recreational marijuana sales, and that was when they opened up. That's projected for the end of next year. Right, is what was projected. Now, the licensing process got kind of hammered. You still have the black market going on there. But I think it has legs because it is a legitimate practice. If I'm going to buy barley, someone has good quality barley, I want to be able to buy and buy that on the market because I know you grow it well in Nebraska.
It's in my mind eventually, especially we can talk about hemp later, but hemp, I mean, it's a commodity, right? It's a commodity like it is corn and soybeans. You look at something and soybeans or corn are a major ingredient in so many things that we eat, wear, like use, I mean, there's a market for it. So there's got to be a marketplace, like you said, for larger companies to get material. And I think eventually it will start to be
I think federally, like everybody always asks me, when do you think it's going to become federally legal? When is this? And my prediction when we started 4 years ago was 6 years into it. So 2 years out from now, I think it might be done sooner than that.
Really?
So let me tell you.
I want to count on your side.
Okay. Let me tell you why I believe that. Okay. But you got to remember two things. I believe medical cannabis will be federally legal, not adult use cannabis. Okay. And I believe that potentially will happen sometime next year. And I'm only telling you that because I'm connected to a lot of different arms like an octopus and what's going on in D.C. with lobbyist groups and other companies I'm with. But when you think about it, 33 states have a medical program technically. I mean, you've got the 11 that have the adult use out of that. You've got a couple more states that are getting ready to come on medically. Banking's always been an issue, right? People are like, oh, I heard you can't bank. No, you can. You just have to find a bank that's allowing you to do it that won't screw you over on their fees that are trying to just rob Peter to pay Paul, right? But I believe that based off the traction I'm seeing, I believe that right before the election next year,
that's why
you're going to see an announcement come up from the current president and say we're going to legalize medical marijuana. Now, what's going to happen is what's on everybody's ticket. We want to legalize marijuana on both sides.
Yep.
The minute you do it right before the election and the other side says, no, we don't want to do it, the side that's been wanting to do it is causing that conflict, right? So I think it's going to happen. But you got to remember when Prohibition ended in 1933 and when federally ended, people are like, well, Prohibition, everybody can do it. You know how long it was before the last state allowed alcohol in their state? Take a guess. How many years?
Isn't it?
I'm going to say Utah.
But give me a number of years, do you think? So 1933 Prohibition ended.
33.
Okay.
60.
Yeah.
60 years?
75.
It's 30. 30 years. It was Mississippi. Now, the other thing you got to remember is each state then can say, yes, it's allowed. Each county can say, no, I don't.
Yeah, there's dry counties.
In Mississippi,
so
right? So that's why I believe medical marijuana. So let's look at some other things that have happened. John Boehner.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Is it through a rescheduling, or how do you see like the actual execution?
I don't know if it's going to be done through a rescheduling. I think it's going to be through the studies that are starting to happen overseas. It might go down to a Schedule 2. Right? Because then it's no longer, now it's got medical benefits.
And 280 doesn't exist anymore for medical companies?
Well, if that ends up happening. But I think it's going to happen, probably descheduled down to a 2 or some other lower classification. And then every state will decide if they want to do it. But you have to look at politically what happens. John Boehner, where did he go? Right? He's now
one of the biggest advocates, right?
One of the biggest opponents of it is now a proponent of it with acreage, right? You've got look at whoever's leaving politics and where they're going, and look how they change. So to me, think about those political connections. So I started like point there. My wife's like, it's like a little investigative map. Oh, Johnny did this. This did this, and you start putting and they all start aligning.
You start aligning the lobbying groups, right? Like
these guys have these. Look at the lobbying groups that are going on, and just who's on the lobbying groups and what's being done.
So it's funny, like when I first saw Joe Biden come out with some hard talk on cannabis, I was like, man, the best thing Trump could do is come out and just flip that switch and But I guess when I see like the progress that actually gets made and things like that, I don't know. I guess I'm still.
I think it's one of those.
I just said an hour ago or 2 hours ago that I don't think it's happening for 4 or 5
Nope.
years. Like, I'm going to stick to that. But
I think I agree with you that to me it's no longer a partisan issue at all, right? It's just, and the majority of Americans, especially when you look at the polls for medical, they support it 80-some%. So that's Democrats, Independents. Like it's everybody, and
Biden's winning.
And that's that last.
He's not winning any friends by coming out.
But I feel like if he needs one thing to put him over the top, like that's the one gamut that they can throw in there to make it politically.
Darby, you said it.
Active.
You said your belief is what my belief is. I think Trump's gonna come out.
It's a card, man. It's a card to pull. I agree.
But I'm gonna tell you about politics. My favorite movie. Go watch Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, 1936. Jimmy Stewart, right? If you've never seen it,
I don't think I've seen it.
No, you got to watch it because Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And the reason I want you to watch it is you're going to realize that even back in the 30s, politics is no different from today. The only difference is we have a different medium to be able to express and get the word out and the news out.
It's like the telegraph.
Stuff is all stuff behind the doors. When you watch the movie, you're going to see how stuff's being driven politically by different groups. Big pharma. Do they want this to go legal? Some say yes, some say no. I mean, look at the opioid crisis. There's a drive behind that. There's money behind that. So even if something's curing that, and you can see this, that not curing it, if it's something that people are less reliant on the opioids because they now are a medical marijuana patient or whatever it may be, or CBD or whatever you may have, does it mean that they want it? And it's all down to money. Washington, every state, it's all down to money.
It's funny because, like, you would think that Big Pharma would be against it until they would find a way to benefit from it. Then they wouldn't be against it, especially if, like, they were the ones that were going to be the recipient of the riches. And, like, I can tell you that when we first opened up around here, almost all the pharmacies were their nose up to us, and we were snake oil salesmen, and now the cocksuckers have full page ads advertising CBD sales, and they're all CBD experts. And it's just interesting to see how the same folks were against something until they thought they had a chance to benefit financially from it themselves, and then all of a sudden, well, you know what, maybe I'll do this. So it's going to be interesting to see. So a couple of things. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens at the federal level, and then the side note that we both discussed is, and so what? It really depends on what state you live in still. I mean, in some ways for us, there'd be a lot of benefits if we could fix the banking issues and some of the tax issues, and to be able to serve.
Tax issues is a big thing. Let's be honest. For you guys as business owners.
And as a retail business, the dispensary, we get it the worst.
And like, people don't understand when we're sitting here and we're harping on the taxes, it's not because we want to take that money and put it in our pocket, right? It's because I want to be able to hire more great employees and staff members to benefit the patients and reinvest in a new building.
Hypothetically, let's just say this for you guys so they understand this. Like, let's just say you make $100,000 in a year. How much can you write off?
They'll call it $50,000.
Yeah, right. But people don't understand like what a normal business would write off, and
even when you
say
$80,000,
like they would almost write probably $80,000 off, because all we're allowed to write off by the letter of the law, Section 280E, is the cost of goods sold. And as a cannabis business and other cannabis businesses out there, people get creative in what the meaning of cost of goods sold is. But the bottom line is you're allowed to write off whatever you paid to purchase the cannabis that you sold. That's it. No advertising, no marketing, no employee salaries, no rent, no electric, nothing. And that it eats the company. It eats away at the bottom line. It eats away at our ability to. And at this point in the cycle, when we're a business that's only been in existence 2 years, like, we need to be pouring all that money back into growing the business to make it what it is.
We're moving into a new location. I mean, we need that money for build out, and then honestly, like, research and development. Like, how you can have an R&D if you don't have a profit margin? If it's if I think we kill it from a business standpoint in terms of how lean we run our business and how we started everything and how we don't waste money and all of that. And we're still just we're still just above the profitability matrix. And I can't. I look at some of these other dispensaries and, like, I have no clue what their long-term strategy is. I mean, we went to the MDMA meeting, and another one of the attorneys was going over the court case. I think it was Harborside with the staffing company.
Out in California.
Yep. And this like guy raised his hand and goes, so let's say you advise some of your clients to set up staffing companies. What would you advise those same clients to do? I'm like, motherfucker. And you know that those guys, I mean, their penalty is that they have now all the 280E money that they tried to funnel out, they have to pay double taxes on because they have two. You took it out of a 280E entity, taxed it, and then put it back into another 280E thing. It taxed it again.
I'll tell you, one of the things that's a perfect example that any business owner coming into this is when you work with a consultant or someone says they're a consultant, you have to talk to at least 10 other references. Legitimate references, because I think what happens is a lot of people get into this from the ancillary side. I'm in the ancillary business, right? Now, when we first started, it was education. We were educating ourselves on everything, 280E, the regs, and all that. But for you guys is that when someone says, "Oh, I'm a consultant, I'm going to charge you X," before you even sign that, that's how we met. We met through you guys talking to other people in the industry, saying, "Guys, you guys want help?" And then here's the guys you want to
CJ
talk
gave
to.
us a really
and I reached out, and Tim actually gave me references to reach out to too. So I mean, like at that point in time, if the consultant that you're working with is willing to tell you, give you references and say, "Hey, don't take my word for it. These are my clients.
Ask them the hard questions.
Ask them the hard questions," and we did, and you're 100% correct. I mean, especially in an industry like this.
Well, we run into especially when a new state opens up for application, even on the hemp side of the business, right? So we talk a little bit about the hemp side. Is you get all these people giving this recommendations. You should do this. Oh, let's just farm it all. Well, before you start farming, what's the size of the market? How many licenses are going to give out? Who are you going to sell it to?
Number one answer on the board.
Right? Who are you going to sell it to?
Most of these people don't know.
And then where are you going to process it? And what are you processing it for? The molecule? For fiber? Right? So we see it all the time. And we just shake our heads. Like our team will go out to it. We were just in Florida at the ag conference. We go to the ag conferences that were focused on hemp. It was great. We went out to University of Florida, their program on cannabis or on hemp, and seeing how things are growing differently from Poland, Italy. It was great to see it in action in Florida because, Florida's opening their hemp program. Does that mean it's going to just grow because it's Florida?
There were so many questions about Maryland. I mean, almost everyone got seeds from California or Colorado. These are seeds that are grown in rocky, mountainous, dry areas. You're going to put them in a swamp on the eastern shore of Maryland?
Go to a longitude, latitude on your map. Figure out a map where they grow hemp worldwide, and just take where you live and go around the world. And if there's nobody growing hemp in that longitude,
probably a bad idea.
You might have a problem.
That's a good reference point.
Awesome.
Honestly, we, based upon that criteria, we could have probably saved hundreds of thousands of people.
I'm just saying, it's funny. It's because when we looked at these plants that were there. We were there 2 weeks ago, and the plant from Poland was they're all planted at the same time. It was literally this high. The one from South China was way up here. You just go across the map, like Florida, where we at, longitude, that makes sense. So getting seed, where are you going to get your seed from? Is it certified seed? Is it required by the state to be certified seed? That's a whole nother issue going on. And then, is it feminized seed? Is it or isn't? Is it, this is coming from hemp, when it came from frickin' cannabis, and then your crop goes hot.
Yeah.
Right? It's just there's such a learning curve on that.
So you guys regulate in the hemp industry too. We last year we did some explorations in terms of trying to understand our identity in that space. We got into it through a desired need. We had patients coming to us saying they needed basically a hemp-based CBD solution, but because they didn't want to get their card, either gun rights, spouse, custody, or employment. Like the three reasons why people don't get their cards. And we were sending them to a couple different websites, and the websites were selling out, and they weren't delivering on time. It was just all kinds of different issues. So we said, okay, we're going to start here and work with a contract manufacturer and bring a tincture to market. And it was so much fun that we started looking at possible a vertical integration piece of it, because we kind of said, well, if we're going to do this, maybe we need to go all in. So we actually purchased seeds from Colorado and provided them to a cultivator, and we looked at the purchasing the processing equipment. But it's so weird because cannabis is federally illegal and every state regulates it differently. but hemp is supposed to be federally legal, but you still see a very ununiversal way of regulating it. We opened up and we did our first online transaction on who was it?
I don't remember who it was or when it was, but it was one and done. That's for sure.
Yeah, we did, we got the email. Congratulations on your very first transaction. You're a business owner. We've shut down your account for illegal CBD sales. It was one of the main. I can't even think which one it was. Stripe.
Yeah.
No, Stripe, Square. Well, so let's talk about, because we're focused on the cannabis side, and it's all cannabis, right? But let's talk on the hemp side of it, right?
So keeping track of home it is.
So the Farm Bill, Agriculture Act got signed, and anybody that's not read it, you can just go find it. Go to I Love Compliance on Facebook, and I think I've got either there or on my LinkedIn. It's 890-something pages, and there's a good portion. If you hit Control F in a PDF, you can type in hemp, and it'll find every area, and go read it. And then when you saw like hemp and all its byproducts, and then all these things that were supposed to happen, and when you talk about states not understanding it, because there's such a...
And Maryland had I don't know if it is, but Maryland had a precursor program, right?
They did.
So before the Farm Bill even gets signed, at like the exact same time, Maryland's Department of Ag, in a good way, just said, we're going to go and try to do this.
They were doing the right thing. They were trying, because they probably saw it coming. And then when the Farm Bill got signed, it said you had 180 days for a state to develop their own, or go by whenever the federal government comes out. So Florida, had their public comment ended on October 31st, but come November is when the federal regs came out. So they have to go back and resend. And Florida had some program stuff, but they had to go back to the federal government and get it readjusted, right? So there's this confusion point. And on the credit card processing, and
that's my background, by the way, too. I started a payment processing company in this room like 10 years ago. And we still don't take credit cards in our dispensary for all the reasons.
Well, and the reason is that you look like Ease out in California, one of the largest online delivery services. Got hit by their largest competitor with a lawsuit saying you're doing, like when someone uses a credit card, it's saying it's coming from Joe's Fish Shack and not from Peninsula Alternative Health, right? And so I buy CBD all the time. I go into a shop. I'm like, can I use my credit card? Yes. I buy it just to see what the credit card says. Because I'm a compliance, and I'm like, not doing it the way you're supposed to.
Jack's Auto Bodies for 1,000 milligram tincture.
Right. So it's an interesting market that there's a lot of confusion in the hemp arena. And if you saw the 15 letters that just came out from the FDA warning letters, but if you saw the day before that or a couple hours before that, the FDA's new stance on cannabis and food products. Did you guys see that?
I did not.
If you go again on Facebook, I think I listed both, but literally before those warning letters came out, the FDA gave their memo again on cannabis and in products, and it was not favorable to the industry. And then those letters came out. So what's happening is, there's only one company, GW Pharma, who is an approved Epidiolex CBD FDA
They have
approved.
the patent for CBD isolate.
So what's happening now is, again, you got to look at all things going on, and I look at all things going on, saying, okay, maybe they're getting into the mix, saying, look at all these people selling CBD. We have the patent on it. So now they're going to start seeing court cases. Is it just one strand? Is it one whatever it is? And that's where all these issues are arising.
Yeah, we back ours up by saying it's a full spectrum hemp extract.
And we try to keep those
hemp
three little
extract
letters.
Is the key is saying hemp extract and not CBD.
We do all those things, and people are constantly, why do you call it that? Why won't you?
What is this?
Why doesn't it say CBD on it? Well, because
CBD's in it.
That's what you're going to get called.
But it's
that's the
more
kind of stuff that
than
gets you in
just
trouble.
No, it's more than just CBD.
And it's more than just CBD too. And that's the other thing that like these isolate products, people are, it's just CBD because people. I mean, that's what people hear. That's what they think works. But really, when you look at it, you want the full spectrum.
Well, the other lawsuits are happening. So interestingly enough, there was another lawsuit just happened with a truck driver up in New York.
That. Tested positive on
that he tested positive by saying
test.
he was only taking products that said labeling is so key. If you're selling a full spectrum CBD or a full spectrum hemp product, you can't be 0% THC. It just can't. So if your labels say full spectrum and 0, you're ripe to get a lawsuit. And there's a group of lawyers. Again, I posted it last year sometime. It was a webinar I paid for to go to It's $150 online. How to sue a cannabis business.
Really?
No, it was
150 bucks.
So I listened to it. I was like, wow. I took a bunch of notes because it was for us.
Yeah.
We take that information right up to for our clients, saying, hey, listen,
Let's
here are the
reverse
things that are
engineer
happening.
this to make sure you're protected
Well,
here,
I
protected
want to
there.
do a workshop on it. I was like, let's do a workshop how to protect that, right? Well, then I was Googling online. And I found someone had, because I didn't want to copyright it. So someone took it and put it on YouTube. So I posted it out and sent it out to everybody. Watch this video to see. Labeling was one. What your dispensary agents are saying. I hate the word bud tender, but what your
We
dispensary,
don't ever call them that.
right? What
We
your
have
dispensary agents are
patient
saying.
consultants.
You got to be careful what they say, because I'm going to tell you, there's secret shoppers going in every location, whether it's state or federal, are going to say, "Oh, does this cure cancer?" Oh yeah, it cures cancer. Take the CBD. So when you watch that webinar, it's like an hour. I'll send it.
Yeah, if you send it to me,
I'll
I
send
would
you the
love to
link.
watch it.
Actually, what I'll do is I'll bring it into Power DMS and I can push it out to the just so the employees can see it.
Well, because we're gonna be starting the sales of CBD in our dispensary at some point in time, and just to be able to have it down, because there are a million things we're not allowed to say and we don't want to say because there is no research in it and we can't back it up.
just-
And unless you know, like we go through stuff, and Mary Pat, because she comes from a pharmacy background, FDA background, she can't say cure, you can't say alleviates, you have to say helps, but can't say like this. And you
Like,
can't say
We tried to
this.
do a one-pager, Tim, and it took us. No, and this is like because
I already know it's going to take you a long time.
It took us
because-
months.
So it's interesting. One of our fellow employees lives in Georgia, and Nick was driving, and he took a picture of a sign for entity, and it didn't say cure. It said anxiety ? Depression ? Whatever the four things were. And I thought it was an intriguing way to do advertising, because you're not saying it cures it. It's asking you, do you have these things? And just said XYZ store. Right? So now, compliance-wise, you're not claiming. You're just asking the question, and you're coming to the store. I don't see an issue with that, right? It's when it says, I mean, if you read the FDA warnings that came out, there's 15 of them. Again, the link is on I Love Compliance, and they're all on Power DMS on your guys' site. I think if I haven't uploaded them, I'll upload them. And just read those to understand
Some
what
of
they're
it was
about.
around that 0% stuff too.
A lot of it was labeling and 0% stuff. And that's the problem is I walk in, I see something that says dietary supplement, right?
Can't say that.
Everybody makes some mistakes, and a legitimate brand new customer of ours, I walked into one of their stores, I picked it up, I was like, this needs to come off the shelf. What do you mean? We get it from somebody else. I said, you can't say this. I called the company, and I was like, how come you guys have dietary supplement on this? It was like, we're changing our label. Okay, you have to change your label because I have to pull all your product off the shelf because I can't have dietary supplement. Because what people don't understand is those little things, and these bad actors who are just like, let me throw. And there was a study done by Frontier just recently, and Frontier had a chart that showed all these tests, 260 something tests were done. I don't know if you saw that or not.
Tim's LinkedIn page is
Oh,
a
yeah, I have
vast
LinkedIn.
knowledge of information.
It's all on phones.
I don't. Unfortunately, LinkedIn's turned into mostly. I'm officially at the point where I'm getting the sales calls and not the sales guy hammering people on LinkedIn. But I really enjoy and follow your page. It's a mix of seeing real life fines and corrective action by states across the country to great data sets from people like Frontier Data, who are kind of premier data collectors in our industry. They produce a lot of great reports. Shout out to those guys.
And it's just, that's the kind of stuff that needs to be shared. That's the kind of stuff that you guys have a relationship with other businesses in this industry. And interesting enough, this industry is a lot like law enforcement. And what I'm going to tell you is law enforcement's a close-knit. They don't trust a lot of people unless you get in and you do stuff with them and they talk to each other. And I didn't think that was going to transcend over to this industry. It's the same way. This industry talks to each other. When you get screwed by somebody, you don't have 5 calls to some other dispensary say, hey, if this person tries getting hired here or this person tries doing this, don't hire them.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, if I'm facing a challenge or something at the dispensary level, there's only 84 other businesses in the world that are facing that same challenge. Like, you quickly find out, like, I have a handful, it's about 4 or 5 in my pocket that when something happens, I go, hey, CJ, hey, Brian from Charm City Medicus, Bob Davis at High Tide is close and local, and just get a good idea of what are other folks facing and what's the vibe on this, and it really is a really tight knit network. And to your point, someone like if a vendor comes in and they're a bad actor, it doesn't take very long for the dispensaries to kind of come together. And the good news for you is you've done such an amazing job. Your reputation is so good in town that I'm really excited for how many more clients you get.
But it's about helping. We want you guys to be successful.
This is just a value issue for me. I mean, like I said, for me, so obviously, thank God I was never in charge of compliance, although I had some things like writing our standard operating procedures and things like that. That's always been, I'm the business development guy, and that was Chuck's job to keep us legal and on the up and up.
I see Chuck's got some gray hair coming in too.
I did
It does, man.
The amount of gray hair I have now, I thought 8 years in construction would do it to me, Tim, but that didn't do anything.
Well, it's such a juxtaposition of like these incredibly high level problems that we're trying to account for and solve, and we're trying to grow an entity, and we're looking at new locations and all this stuff, down to did you mail back a badge within 30 days, and did you
go through the proper training when you onboarded an employee.
Confirm sales, right?
Confirm
in metrics.
sales, yep.
Waste log. Did you put the date? Visitor log. Did you log out somebody?
All those.
And for those in
things.
Maryland, go to the MMC website. On the homepage on the left side, there's consent orders. Click on it. There's consent orders against licensees, against agents, and now there's one against doctors now, right? That's new. Go read those. Those should be your Bible. Like if you read the ones against licensees for pretty much all dispensaries, take it and read it and look at what it says. For me, it's a common sense. You talk about when an agent leaves. You have 24 hours to notify the MMCC in a specific manner that's stated by a bulletin and by the RIC. So in our SOPs that we have a process down. We have an incident report. We have all that stuff so that I'm not getting fined.
And then we mail the badge back. We have the tracking number, send it, and it's like a whole. So we try to cross all the T's and dot the I's.
Document. And the one thing I tell everybody is, if it's not documented, it didn't happen.
So that's so true. And like the only thing we've ever been dinged on, to my knowledge, in a very serious way with MMCC is they sat down and they wanted all these employee documents. And we're literally scavenging through our document security closet and trying to pull manila folders, and it was embarrassing. And it wasn't like that we don't run a great business, but like that was so like in that stage of where we were at in the business, like the employee documents were like the last thing I thought they were going to ask for.
History.
Drug background. I'm like, come on, guys. Like we have, and I don't know if you know this, but the first time that we got inspected, so Chuck and Corpon have full-time jobs. I don't know where Mary Pat is. It's for our first 420. Okay, we gave out free grams. We got 100 people lined up, and I see the charges pull up. I'm like, no fucking way. Pilcher's got his clipboard. He's like dodging people, like trying to, excuse me, pardon me. Hey, excuse me, pardon me. Comes up and he's like, we're here for, your inspection. I'm like, on 420? He goes, well, we really didn't put the dates together. And he starts asking me for employee documents. I'm like, sir, we have 100 patients outside my facility. I need to serve. Like, can you please come back?
Day before Thanksgiving.
It came back. They told me, I can see you're up to your...
I got the email from...
assholes and alligators or something like some very inspector like saying. I was very thankful and praised them and said, thank you guys so much for please coming back. But
they come at the most inopportune time, but that's life.
Yeah.
Right? What we try to do as a service, and we have this in Maryland, like when we know one of our dispensaries, like they come in that day, we basically like the bat phone, what we call it the email alerts. We have a general email alert that says, they're in this state, they're in this point, send it out.
The last thing that I'll say in kind of closing is that for me, it's the perception and reputation of the medical program is very important. And if we want to get the respect from hospital, if we want to get the respect from pharma and these other entities, you're going to have to start walking the walk and talking the talk like they do. You're going to have to show that you're not just without gloves on touching medicine that people are supposed to consume. Like, you have to show that you have a regulatory nature and that there's a really strong regulatory backbone of your program. And I think that that's what provides the legitimacy. We've been through some issues so far in the state of Maryland, vape pens, for instance. I gotta be honest, like, I wasn't surprised at all the results that everybody passed. And I never felt any sense of concern in the legitimacy of the products in Maryland because our lab testing is so stringent. I've been to these facilities. They are great facilities. I mean, you go to Curio, they're GMP. They've gotten their certification. They're officially a GMP certified. They're the only one in the state of Maryland. But they're not the only one that operates like that. A lot of these facilities are top-notch facilities, but if they don't have the regulatory backbone and there's not this sense of a point of truth, then I don't know that you get any credibility. So I really appreciate what you guys do for us and allow us to focus on serving patients and growing our business and knowing that we are compliant and that we are, our T's are crossed and I's are dotted.
Yeah, and like everybody else, we're not perfect either, and we understand that. And what it is it's an education time. We do love compliance. That's why we focus on it, so that you can focus on the patient.
I believe you. I really appreciate it. Tim, thank you so much for coming on.
No,
I really
thank you guys.
It.
Is there anything else you want to websites?
Give your
companies.
Where can folks
so it's
find
ilovecompliance.biz is our main website. But really, you can follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. And
it's way more entertaining than you would expect. Compliance.
Well, the one thing we focus on is we're trying to curate fines and issues that are happening around the country. We're actually gonna start curating it to where we have an email alert going out like some of the sites you see where they have the hits. It's going to be the compliance hits, so you can actually see what's happening. So for us, it's about a collaborative effort, and we're here to ask if you have any questions on the compliance side. You can email me at tim@ilovecompliance.biz or info@ilovecompliance.biz. But we're here to help.
You can tell that you have the business mindset. I think sometimes it feels like there's a disconnect between the folks in compliance and the folks trying to grow the business. And that's one thing that's been successful for us is working together and understanding that. I wanted to sell CBD in the waiting room forever ago, but we're going to do it the compliant way and the right way. And we're not going to do all this work to get a dispensary open and go get dinged on a CBD infraction selling in your waiting room. So but it sounds silly that you can sell our CBD anywhere else in the world other than our dispensary.
And I will tell you one thing about compliance for business valuation, and not coming from me, but from business value partners who look at businesses and evaluate. They've told me that when they come in and look at a client to buy, a dispensary to buy, if they walk in and they have their ducks in a row and they have a program, I don't care if it's us or they have a program, there's a 25-30% increase in valuation because they're
especially in this industry, right?
This industry for sure.
Well, it's great that you have $10 million in sales, but what's the likelihood that you're going to get shut down because you're doing XYZ violations? And we get approached all the time. It's no mystery that people come to us, and I can tell you that one of the things that I was surprised about was, to your point, they want to know that you're compliant. They want to know that you paid your taxes 288. It's like this badge of honor. It sucks that you guys are still poor, but wow, you paid that 280 bill. Good for you guys.
Yeah, 3 of our largest clients came from them doing fishing expeditions at a single dispensary, and they walked in with their suits, and they're like, "Let me see your compliance." And he pulls out his phone. He's like, "What do you want to see?" They're like, "What system do you have here? We don't have this where we're at." And then the CEO calls me and says, "Hey, I think you're going to call from XYZ." Sure enough. And we start working with them and trying to help them with multi-state operators and trying to get them to understand, have that mindset. But it's operators like you who are doing a service for the industry in the way you operate. And I think you guys are going to, with the new location, I'm super excited that you're going to be able to serve more patients. And as we go along, I think just having the open mindset, and you mentioned the MDMDA. If people don't know what that is, I think that's important to be a part of that association, especially if you're a dispensary, the Maryland Dispensary Association.
Yep.
We're a supporting vendor. We just signed up for year 2. Just because that's a value for us, just to have that connection. Yeah,
it's I would like to see us be a little bit more aggressive and successful this year than we were last with the MDMDA, but it's definitely important to have a voice, a solidarity between the independent dispensaries, and sometimes you feel like you're a little bit on the island when you see the big multi-state operators coming around. So it's good to have that association.
Yep.
So
we appreciate it. Thank you for your time, and thanks for all you guys are doing. Our team appreciates you guys as a customer.
Thanks, Tim. We appreciate everything you do for sure. Makes me sleep at night.
Perfect.